There's a new directive in town. It's NIS2 from the European Union. And if you think that it may not apply to you, let me explain. It might very well. This one's a big one. It goes beyond ISO 27002. It covers the supply chain. So if you're a European business, or if you supply a European business, or if you're a supplier to a supplier to a European business, this might very well apply to you. And it goes beyond where we're normally used to. So let me explain NIS2, what it is, who it applies to, and what you're going to do about it. So, what are we going to explain on this one? Well, this one's all about the EU's new NIS2 Directive. But before you hit skip to the next one, you may want to pay attention because this applies to many more companies than just the ones in the EU. And if you're sitting back thinking, I've ISO 27000, I'm okay, stay tuned. You're not. What are we going to explain? We're going to explain what NIS2 is, why it is different this time, who it applies to, which is a lot more than you think, and how you're going to get compliant. So, shall we start? NIS2? A European cyber directive like many other cyber directives in the line of GDPR or DORA or any of the other ones that you can shake a stick at. NIS2 is applied to European member countries, and we expect European member countries to implement this through legislation. The timelines are, it's happening right now, so this is something you do need to know about it. What is it? Why is it different? Well, we've seen many different legislations over the years, and they tend to be very specific to an individual sector. GDPR, in my opinion, is a really strong data privacy and protection standard. But it applies just to personally identifiable data, personally sensitive data, and personal health information. DORA is a really good standard for financial regulation. It's financial institutions around the EU. This time, they've gone for the big one. They've widened the remit. This is very, very general. It encompasses lots of different companies, lots of different sorts of businesses, and they've hit the supply chain. So if you're sitting there, say in the UK, as a supplier to customers in Europe, they're going to be required to make sure you, their supplier, is compliant. Seepage. This is going to seep throughout Europe and the wider economy. It doesn't matter where in the world you're a supplier from. If you're supplying essential and critical services into the EU, you may be covered. What else? It adds in new things that we haven't seen before. At last, we've got governance. Specific governance requirements that you must implement. No longer good enough with your senior team sitting back. What else is different? Well, it now requires a SOC. Very few standards require a full proper security operations center, complete with those lovely little playbooks that we like so much. And wide-scale reporting, incident reporting within defined time limits. You see, this one is different. They've really expanded the scope, they've hit new topics, they've put in things, in my opinion, we've been missing from other frameworks and other legislations and other standards. So, let me explain who it applies to. You're going to hate these two words. Well, learn to hate them. I already do. Essential and important. Are you essential or are you just important? Because they classify all types of organizations and businesses into two categories. The enforcement between the two categories will be slightly different. If you are important enough to be essential, then it's going to be a proactive implementation. You're going to be required to audit. They're going to check before events happen. You don't do it, there's punishment and fines. If you're essential enough to be important only, then, well, it's after the fact enforcement. The same rules will apply, but they won't expect you to audit and proactively implement. They will only look if you have an incident, but if you have an incident, they're going to apply the same standards. So, how specific are they? They're not. They're mega general. Underneath essential, we get energy, transport, banking, and health. And that covers everything from insurance companies through airlines, into electric and nuclear production, into shipping, into chiropractors and doctors. That's bad enough. But under essential, they also include digital infrastructure. Now, wouldn't we like to explain what that means? And if you can, please do, because the NIS2 was a little bit vague in this respect. It looks like the widest possible interpretation of a digital infrastructure. You provide web services, you provide a SOC service desk, you provide software as a service to a European customer. They're going to need it. If your customers in energy, transport, banking, health, they're going to need you to be compliant. So those are the essential services: energy, transport, banking, health, and digital infrastructure. If you're merely only important postal and courier services, you're a transport company, you ship stuff to Europe. Your customer, if they are energy, health, transport, banking, or digital infrastructure, your customer is going to require you to be compliant. They won't be able to do business with you otherwise. It covers supply chain. Your customers, how many shipping companies and couriers can you think of that have a more mature system than ISO 27000? This is going to be a major shake-up in these industries. These industries are in for a rude awakening. This is happening right now. Postal and courier services, they're important. And then it gets a bit sublime and ridiculous. Waste management, sewage, bin lorries, anybody dealing with waste management, and the teeny little insignificant sector of food production. Food production. The entire food production supply chain is in scope. You're a cheese manufacturer, you ship it to Europe, you're going to lose customers if you're not NIS2 compliant. So, it applies to quite a lot, actually. If it applies to you, let me explain what you're going to do about it. How are you going to be compliant? Well, a good starting point is ISO 27000. Now, ISO 27000 Series 1 and 2 is considered to be the de facto standard in Europe. It's quite a high level of security for any organisation to achieve, but it's getting a bit creaky round the edges, a little bit rusty, maybe not polished everywhere. There's things missing from it, and some of them I've been waiting for years. As an auditor, going around businesses, I see companies make these mistakes time and time again because they follow ISO 27000 as a compliance tool. And it's not a compliance tool. It's a framework to help create value. This time round, if you've ISO 27000, what do you need to do on top of it? Let me explain. Number one, full supply chain. If somebody is a critical or major supplier to you, they're in scope. So even if you want to supply to Europe, your suppliers are going to be in scope as well. ISO 27000 vaguely mentions it. It's nowhere near as detailed. The requirement is nowhere near as high. Second, my favorite. I might actually like this standard. Good corporate governance. No longer can your senior management team sit back and say, nothing to do with us, IT problem, go and get it fixed. No, it requires real, proper strategic leadership. It requires the senior team to receive the right reports, make decisions, and set real strategy with proper risk appetites. At last. It's about time. It's one of the biggest things we get wrong, dysfunctional management. And finally, dysfunctional management, if you have good governance, You drive BCP, don't you? Business continuity planning, which is mentioned in ISO 27000, but this one goes into so much more detail. It requires you to have a SOC service, a security operations center based on an incident response process like NIST 861 or 2, a proper SOC response with detection, analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery, all that good stuff. It requires properly tested playbooks. Again, at last, you need those anyway. So, NIS2. It applies to a lot more companies than you may think. It requires more than ISO 27001 and 2. And in my opinion, most of the extra things it requires, you should already be doing anyway. I actually quite like this one. But it's going to be a rude awakening for many suppliers when their customers come and say, do you have this? You need to start preparing now. So, what have we explained in this session? We've explained NIS2, what it is, why it is different, who it applies to, and what you're going to do about it. Ladies and gentlemen, NIS2, what's your strategy? Why do I know so much about it? I've just spent the last 3 months developing courses for our company here, Nemstar, to try to deliver it. So I think a lot of companies are going to need a lot of help with NIS2. Reach out if you're one of them. Do me a favor. Do you know all the social media likey things? If you enjoyed it, please. I really do hope you enjoyed it, and I really do hope that you learned something. So maybe you'll join me next time.